little bit of a follow-up video on matchplate making and the flask hardware that I was casting. And I apologize, the last couple of videos we're seeing a little bit of fur hanging in the upper corner of the screen, and I noticed on one of them I had a little string hanging. That's the dead cat that's on the microphone there to hopefully cut some of the background noise out of the back of this. So I got to find a solution for that, but for today I guess we're still dealing with that when we've got the camera faced this way. So this is shot on my iPad right now, so that's why we're seeing that. So I apologize, but anyway, we're trying to get better as time goes on. Anyway, I wanted to compare. I did another casting after I modified the match plate for that flask hardware a little bit. So I wanted to show you what I've done and what I still haven't accomplished. Now, I've still got a place on this match plate where it had torn out before, and I'll put a link up here to part 1 of that if you haven't seen that video. But when we looked at the original setup that I cast, there was a couple of things that were not right. We had some tear out, some fallout here on this, especially on this one pattern. And this is actually a pattern that did not print the way I wanted it to, which is my fault. I went ahead and utilized it. It's one that when you print, these were off of 3D prints, and when you print those out, you have the option of what kind of adhesion you want on the bed. And they print in this configuration with the bottom down flat against the platen of the 3D printer. Normally, if you print with normally I can get by with printing what they call a skirt around it, which just gives you an outline that's 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, whatever it is, away from the outline of your print patterns, depending on how you set them up. That's the way I printed this one, and I found that with my printer anyway, I get better adhesion and it gives me a better print if I print what they call a raft, and that fully supports that. That attaches to the bottom of this and easily separates, but it extends out 1/2 inch. You can set whatever distance you want, but about a 1/2 inch out. So what happened with this is I printed it with a skirt around it, and that allowed the print itself, when it got to printing this, it peeled up on the corner, on one corner. Well, it would be this corner in particular. So that's the problem area with this, with using this one on this match plate. And I set it up. I'm going to continue to use it. I'm going to modify it a little bit more. I've cast once out of it, but I'm going to cast another one out, modify it a little bit, and cast another one, see how it goes. And I'll adjust my match plate until I get that right to take care of that. So what's happening with this is it's got a little bit more lean, I think, this way. It's not perfectly straight. So when we draw it out, even using a match plate, we're getting a little bit of fallout on there as it hangs and pulls out. So that was one of the things, and that's one of the things I'm addressing here and trying to take care of. The other thing was I printed those on that snap flask, and I've since taken that snap flask and made it into a non-functional snap flask. I've screwed it solid together and glued it, and then I've taken the snap flask opening hardware off of there, the latch assembly off of there. Now what I noticed with that is, and that was one of the problems I had when I cast this one too, but I'll explain that in a minute. One of the things I did notice when I used that as a snap flask was, even though I had weighted those molds, it lifted on me. So without the extra weight of the flask itself, the upper flask half and the hardware on there, the top half of that mold was able to float once we poured aluminum into it. So when you look at these, we've got, and this one's not quite so bad. Here's the worst of the 4 of them. We've got quite a bit of extra thickness here on the top, and you can see where it's lifted that much, because I didn't have that problem with the casting I did yesterday with the flask on there permanently. So changes I made to the pattern itself was I went in and sanded it some, and I've remarked it here. This is the problem pattern right here, and it's this corner, so it's not laying quite right. So I'm going to go back and put a little filler in there, and I'm going to sand it. The other thing that I did on there was on the feeders here on the back side, I've narrowed them down quite a bit. I've beveled them down. So when we compare the thicker feeders and how thick they are in there, one of these is broken off on me. When we compare them to these, I've shortened these up quite a bit. I've narrowed them down so we don't have nearly as much material. So this is the way that And like I say, I've broken one. I've cut the sprue off of there. But this is the way it would have cast. And we didn't get any of that extra lifting. And I didn't bother to weight this pattern at all. This was just the flask itself. So anyway, we've narrowed these down. We don't have nearly as much material on top, just so it's easier to finish them out. You know, we can take them off, and this one broke off when I was taking it out as I was knocking the sand off. So that's all the material that I have to sand off to get down to basically level here. So that's just an improvement on it. Makes the cast easier, makes finishing them out easier. So anyway, that's the way they cast. But yeah, on the upper patterns, which is this one right here, this is our problem pattern, we still have some tear out on the edges in there. Not nearly as much there. We've got a little deformation on there. That's actually caused by me changing that flask around. The pins are a little bit sticky on it. Once I screwed it down solid, it took out some of that play that was in that flask hardware and in that flask, and made it quite a bit tighter. It released initially very nicely, but as we got up to the top to lift it off the pins, why it wanted to hang there a little bit. So that's why we've got a little more waviness and things that we might not have had before in the pattern. So I have to adjust it. Hopefully with this new hardware, that's going to take care of that problem. So anyway, that's what's going on with there. Just wanted to give you a little update. So today I'm going to start working on some new flasks. So I've got a little bit of material that we're going to plane down, which I won't show. We're just going to run it through the planer until we get it to thickness, and then we're going to start building flasks. Here is the flask hardware. I just cut the top of the sprue off. The rest of this is the way it came out of the mold. It's pretty well dialed in. I could take out a little bit more material on the feeders, on the back sides, but I think I'll probably just leave them where they are for the little amount that I'm going to have to work on them. But we tuned that snap flask a little bit, which is no longer a snap flask. I tuned the pins on it a little bit more, and then I worked the mold a little bit, or the pattern a little bit more on the snap flask. So that's I'm going to consider that dialed in. I'm not going to do anything else to this pattern. And of course, here's the match plate for it. This is where I reworked it down through here. Was the places that it was having trouble pulling. So it's got a couple of coats of shellac on it now, and the backside still looks kind of rough. I'll probably get a couple more coats of shellac on it next time I'm mixing. But anyway, that one's done. Or the other flask, I had two patterns in it. This is just one of the hubs or the bearing carriers, depending on how they're machined, for the sand muller project. These are the hubs that go on the gearbox. Two of them get bored out for bearing supports, and the other two are just caps that go on. So that was a success. And the other one that's going, or that I threw in, and this one's a little bit rough, but it's just the way it was pulled. It hadn't been finished or anything. And this is a little 3D pattern that I've got. And what this is going to be, hopefully it's interesting for you while you're sitting at home, being safe. So anyway, thanks for taking the time to watch, guys.